What's up, guys? So this is the first in multiple videos on different factoring techniques, right? So in this video, we'll be going through factoring by GCF, or factoring by greatest common factor, all right? And all we just need is, okay, cool. And if I ever learn how to edit, I can just kind of like make this magically appear. That'd be dope. Okay, so factoring by greatest common factor is essentially we're looking for a number. So here we'll work through it by examples. So we're looking for a number or a term that is a factor of every single term in the expression we're given, right? And by factor, it means we're looking for a number that divides every term. So I think this particular one, it's a very easy method, and it's best explained through examples, okay? So say we wanted to factor out a common term here, right? 4x minus 6. So what goes into 4x that also goes into minus 6? Well, 2, right? 2, they're both even numbers, so let's try 2. So all we do is we write it this way. We're taking a 2 out of this expression. So a 2 comes out, and then in parentheses goes what's left. What is left when I do 4x divided by 2? 2x. And what is left when I do negative 6 divided by 2? Negative 3. And it's just as simple as that, right? 2 is the largest number, the greatest common factor that goes into both of these numbers. So we took that number out, and then what's left in parentheses is what essentially happens when I divide 2 into both of these numbers. All right, so now let's look at a little more complex of an example. Not too bad. Oh, this is meant to be a 10x. All right, so here, I look for a number that can go into 5x squared and 10x squared. All right, at this point, you should be familiar with how to divide with variables. If not, there are other videos out there on how to do that. Okay, so let's just look for a common term in here. So I know, I think an easy way to kind of work through this is do the numbers first and then do the variables. So let's, instead of looking at the x's, let's look at just the 5 and the 10. What number goes in both 5 and 10? 5, right? So 5 goes on the outside. Now, let's look at just the variables. So what number goes in x squared and x? X. So 5x goes on the outside. And then what stays on the inside is what's 5x squared divided by x? Well, that should be just 1x, or x. We typically don't write the 1 out. Now what is 10x divided by 5x? Be a plus sign. 10 divided by 5 is just 2. And x divided by x is 1, and we don't need to write the 1. So factoring this gets us 5x times x plus 2. Okay? Now let's look at another example. All right? So here we have 2x to the third minus 8x squared plus 7x. So what do we do? First, let's look at the numbers first. We have 2, 8, and 7. Now, I don't see a number that goes into all of them. 7 is a prime number, so I know only 1 and 7 go into it, and 7 can't go into these other two, so there is no number that I can factor out. Now let's look at the variables, just the x terms. So we have x to the third here, x to the second, and x. So a common factor for all of them would just be x. So x is on the outside, and again, I divide kind of one at a time. 2x to the third divided by x, 2x to the second, minus 8x squared. So 8x squared divided by x is 8x. And then 7x divided by x is just 7. All right, pretty easy. Now we're going to look at a couple of examples that, although they look more complicated, they're really not. They're basically the same thing as long as you kind of focus on doing the same method. All right? So here we have 15x to the third, y squared, plus 10x to the second, y to the fourth. All right? So let's look at the numbers first. 15 and 10. What is the GCF between them? It looks like 5. 5 goes into both of them, and I can't think of a higher number. So 5 goes right here. Now let's look at just the x's by themselves. X to the third and x to the second. The highest term in them is an x to the second. And then y to the second, y to the fourth. Highest term is y to the second. Right? Easy as that. And hopefully I have enough room here. Now I do the division. 15 divided by 5 gets me 3. X to the third divided by x squared is x. And then y squared divided by y squared is just 1, which we don't need to write. Now plus what's 10 divided by 5? We're left with 2. X squared divided by x squared is 1, so that totally cancels. And then y to the fourth divided by y squared gets us y to the second. And that's our fully factored form. The last example we're going to do is a little bit longer, right? But still, exact same method. It's really should be just as easy as our very first example. It's just you have to make sure to, don't get overwhelmed and kind of work through it, right? One piece at a time. So I'll just read this out because I kind of mess up here. 22 x to the fifth times 22x to the fifth y to the seventh plus 14 x to the third y to the eighth plus 18 x to the sixth y to the fourth. Okay, now same thing. Let's look at just our numbers first. Okay, what goes into 22 and also goes into 14 and also goes into 18? 2 is the highest number. 2 is the greatest common factor for all of those. So I'm going to write it below because I obviously don't have enough room on this side here. So 2 will go here. Now let's look at just the x terms. X to the fifth, x to the third, x to the sixth. X to the third is my highest term. So I'll write that right there. That is not a 3, but I tried. Now we have y to the seventh, y to the eighth, and y to the fourth. So the highest term between all of those, y to the fourth, right? Variables are actually a lot easier to deal with than actual numbers because I can just look at the exponents and take the highest one, or lowest one. All right, so now let's start dividing to find each term. So 22 x to the fifth, y to the seventh, divided by 2 x to the third, y to the fourth. 22 divided by 2 is 11. X to the fifth divided by x to the third, x to the second, y to the seventh divided by y to the fourth, y to the third. All right, now that term is done. Plus 14 x to the third, y to the eighth divided by 2 x to the third, y to the fourth. 14 divided by 2, 7. X to the third divided by x to the third totally cancels. Y to the eighth divided by y to the fourth. Y to the fourth. And if I hadn't mentioned it already, knowing how to divide with variables and varying exponents, super important. Make sure you know how to do this. Now, 18x to the sixth, y to the fourth. 2x to the third, y to the fourth. So 18 divided by 2 gives us 9. X to the sixth and x to the third, dividing them gets us x to the third. Y to the fourth totally cancels. So we have our final answer here. All right, so that's pretty much it. Factoring by GCF, like I said, is pretty simple. It's that same method every time, just look at the numbers, find the highest term, look at the variables, highest term. Once you have that, write it on the outside. And then on the inside, just divide one by one to see which terms go on the inside. All right. If there are any questions, throw it down in the comments. And if you need to, check out some of the other videos I have on, basic factoring.